Our stories are made of two things, facts and opinion. And then we have our emotions that are a reaction to those things. So for a parent to be conscious of, are we passing on prejudicial stories?
Hello and welcome to MoveConversations. This is your host, Venkat. We are delighted to have with us Mr. Chuck Wisner, the author of The Art of Conscious Conversations, transforming how we talk, listen, and interact. Chuck, welcome to the show. Could you please introduce yourself to our viewers and our audiences, and how would you describe your work and what kind of clients you work with, etc.?
Okay, thanks for having me. My work for the last 30 years have been with large, significant companies in the C-suite with the executives and their teams, and around leadership communication, team culture. And through that process, I realized the things I learned when I studied the ontology of language is not very accessible to people. So I wanted to write the book to make it accessible for everyone and practical also. So that's the birth of the book.
Yeah, the book looks like, your work, your experiences in coaching people, in training people. And in that you discuss 4 types of conversations: storytelling conversations, collaborative conversations, creative conversations, and very interestingly, commitment conversations. So let's start with the first type, the storytelling conversations.
Right.
Please tell us a good story about how important storytelling conversations are.
All right. So a couple of things. Stories are a beautiful thing. My wife loves to read fiction and novels, and that we learn through storytelling, and we always are storytelling. But then personally, we tell stories about other people. We have stories about ourselves and other people. And when that serves us well, that's a really good thing. Helps us connect with people, build relationships. But we also have stories that we hold about ourselves and other people that aren't helpful, they're harmful. And so two quick examples. One is I grew up with a story that I wasn't a big enough man. And that has devastating consequences. And then in business, I have multiple examples where I have executives who have a story about their value and how good they are, and it's not aligned with reality, what other people think about them. So that's detrimental to them because they aren't seeing the world as it is, but as they think it should be. And so that's these stories that we have and hold and tell are really, really important to how we show up in the world.
Right. So, as you said, that the storytelling that we do to ourselves can have a beneficial aspect as well as a detrimental aspect. So, what is the effect of the bad aspect of this storytelling, and how does it affect our conversations, going forward?
Okay, so if we take my example of the story of Not a Big Enough Man, which I got from my grandfather, I was a young boy, so his word had power, his word had authority. I adopted that story unconsciously. As I grew up, that story had an impact on my confidence, my ability to show up in conversation with other men, especially because I always felt myself less than. And when I finally busted that story, because when we do have a story that's harmful, I like to think we have the power to bust them and say, wait a minute, that's not true. That's not aligned with my reality. And when I finally busted it, it was dramatic because all of a sudden I didn't see myself as smaller than. I saw that I was 6 feet. I saw that I was successful. I was an architect. I was a father. And all those things, I began to say, wow, I've been living with this, but it isn't the truth. So that's one way to deal with it.
So, what we have seen is in the last few years, there's a debate on fact versus fiction. And this has become very intensive and it's seen across the world. People on the extremes even say openly or on social media, you keep your facts, I'll stick to my opinion. Now, we find that this has polarized the society. So when we are having difficult conversations, whether it is at work or at home, what should we know about the nature of opinions? What is it made of? Because you also write that, we can process our private conversations, asking for archetypal questions.
Right. So for the state of the world, we're in a pretty awful place when expertise and science and facts, we lose that solid ground to stand on. And so that's we can talk about that later, but that's a real issue to deal with. Now, as for our opinions, so our stories, we were talking about our stories are made of two things, facts and opinions. And then we have our emotions that are a reaction to those things. But if we look at our opinions, every judgment we have, every strong opinion we have, we want them and we thrive on them. But once again, if we are identified with our judgment or identified with our opinion really strongly, then we're going to enter a conversation with a fist, like, no, I'm right, you're wrong. I'm going to prove me right. I'm going to prove you wrong. And there's nowhere to go because we end up fist to fist, right? Or a battle ensues. So if we can understand that, number one, our opinions are not the truth. Our opinions are not facts. In fact, they're very messy because embedded, what's under our opinions is all of our beliefs, all of our prejudices, all of our standards, what's good, what's bad, what's right, what's wrong, all of our morals, all those things are embedded in our opinions, but we speak them often as though they're true. And we forget to unclench our fists and understand for ourselves, why am I thinking this way? Why I'm so upset about this? And so when we can sort of take them apart, I call deconstruct them, we have a better window into whether they're value or whether they're not valued.
Right. So what are the 4 kinds of archetypal questions that we could ask to break that down?
Yeah. So I love these 4 archetypal questions because it's sort of like a recipe or it's a reminder to deconstruct our thinking. It's also helpful for us to help other people open their fist to reveal. So if we're in a conversation with a fist, there's these 4 questions are a way of sort of slowly opening our hand, where we're going, wait, okay, this is why I'm thinking this way. And we sort of let go of the defending it. And we say, well, this is why I think this way. Maybe the other person thinks differently, right? So the questions are, what are your desires? And fundamentally, every time we care about something or we have a strong opinion, we want something to happen. Now, desires can be a good thing because they help us set goals and help us achieve things, but they also can be misaligned with reality. So I want a sunny day. Well, it's raining, so then I'm going to be depressed all day, right? Or I want this person, my leader, to act this way, or I want my wife to act this way, but they're different. And then so we're a mismatch for reality. So just being conscious of our desires is really helpful because we can choose to let go or check ourselves against reality. The second question is, what are our concerns? So every judgment we have a concern about tomorrow. We have a concern, I don't want tomorrow to look like today. I don't want next week to feel like we're making the same mistake, or I don't want my children to do this in 2 weeks. We have concerns. There are no rocket science about them, but sometimes they live in the background of our awareness, and bringing them to the foreground is really helpful, especially in a conversation. We can say, instead of being in a battle, we could say, here's my concern, and that sort of softens the conversation, right?
Right.
The third question is authority. And these are power issues. So every conversation we have, parent, child, boss, worker, colleague, you and you're giving me authority on your podcast to speak, right? There are always authority issues, but generally they're causing turmoil for us, but we aren't consciously aware of them. And even for friends, one friend might say, "Oh, you look terrible today," and I just blow it off. And another friend might say, "You look terrible today," and I go, "Wow, I must not have gotten a good night's sleep." Or yeah, I do, because one person I'm giving their words power, and the other person I'm not. And so there's always this power play, and it gets exasperated in business because of hierarchies. And then the last is every judgment we have is based on standards that we have about what's good, bad, beautiful, ugly, right, wrong, fair, unfair, just, not just. And the thing about standards is that mostly 90% plus of our standards, we did not consciously choose. We adopted them from our family, our culture, our religion, our teachings, our education. And so I'm not saying standards are bad. I'm just saying to be aware that we can be in an argument with someone. And if we just say, well, wait a minute, I'm measuring success this way, and you're measuring it this way, that's an enlightened conversation versus doing this, right? So the 4 questions can help us open our hand, and it can help us open other people's hands and go, let's have a conversation. That was long-winded, but I got all.
No. It was not very well structured. Thanks a lot. Right, it gives a lot of clarity. In your writings, you also talk about other types of questions in addition to those related to desires, concerns, authority, and standards. Certain questions that we can ask to understand ourselves and others better during a conversation. And you said we could use them to navigate difficult conversations. So, what are those additional set of questions that we should use?
Well, the 4 are sort of a reminder of where we can start, right?
Right.
But I think in general, rather than specific questions, in general, we have to realize that we are trained to be advocates. We are trained to put our position forward, have the answer, or be the smartest person in the room. We're educated to raise our hand if we have the answer. We aren't educated to raise our hand to ask a question, right?
Right.
So just understanding and beginning to pay attention to our pattern of wanting to advocate for our position, right, is a way of saying, well, what's the opposite end of that? The opposite end of that is inquiry. And this is where sort of listening comes in too, because the ability to honestly, sincerely ask questions to better understand the other person is really the fundamentals of asking good questions. The 4 archetypes are just a foundation, right? But what we have to do is fall in love with questions, because right now we're in love with being right.
Right.
And two words I like saying that if we're in love with being right, then we're being a knower, and we have to know everything, and we have to identify that our identity is based on that. But what if we're a learner? What if we're a learner and saying, well, I have an opinion, I'm willing to change it. And by the way, I really want to understand how you're thinking. So we can learn together, and we might come up with a better solution together than we do individually.
Right. So, this leads me to asking, many youngsters are entering the job market. There are also people in, transition. They will all of these people will be facing job interviews, and reflecting on our own lives, we all know that, job interviews are some of the make or break conversations that professionals have, right? Can this DCAS, desires, concern, authority, and standards framework be useful for people in going to job interviews to prepare for and navigate the interview process itself?
Yeah, I think it can work in 2 ways. One, if ahead of time, before an interview, be aware of the 4 questions, right? What do you want out of this interview? What's your desire, right? Do you have concerns about the company? Do you have concerns about the job? Be aware that every interview, there's a power imbalance. So just be aware of that, because it'll change how you show up. If you show up as a smart aleck, it's not going to get you very far. But if you just let them have their power, because they do, you can't do anything about it, it changes how you show up. And then lastly, standards wise, do your homework. What are the cultural standards of this company? What is their culture? How do they treat people? Do your homework in that way. So that's doing, paying attention ahead of time about the company and the dynamics of the interview. But then personally turn it back around yourself and say, what do I want out of this? And often one of the biggest problems in interviews is people don't examine their desire, and they want the job so badly that they're so nervous that they don't perform well, because they're just hungry. They have to have this, and then they worry about, should I say this or should I say that, right? But if you can get that in check and say, the worst thing that can happen, I won't get the job. So let me relax and be myself and say, here's what I'd like, here's a job I want, but don't go in hungry, right? Right.
And they are focusing on the outcome rather than the process itself, right? Excelling in the process.
That's right. Yeah. And so, again, standards. What do you want? What are your standards? How does that measure up against the company culture, for instance, right? So it's just a way to prepare yourself, because it's okay also in interviews to answer their questions in a good way, but it's also okay to ask them questions.
Right, absolutely. So that makes the interview into a conversation, right? And if it goes very well, people can, reflect on it and say, hey, I had a good conversation with this person, right? Rather than a Q&A, I had an interview with this person, right? That's right.
I like to call it the collaborative dance. It's a give and a take. It's a give a little, take a little, ask and tell. And be aware of that dance. Yeah.
True. So, you brought up the word collaborative. So, I'll use that as a segue to the next part of the discussion. While the name collaborative conversation sounds pretty nice, right? When we are with people with, different points of view from us, conversations actually deteriorate pretty quickly. Right? Why are these collaborative conversations so difficult to have, be it at work, be it at home, and how can we approach them to get better outcomes?
So one of the major stumbling blocks of collaboration is how much we identify with our opinions. So like I said, when we go into a conversation with a fist, the reason we're clenched is because we have our opinions, and underneath are our beliefs and our prejudices, but our egos and our identities are connected, right? So if we go into a meeting and we have an opinion or a judgment, and someone else comes with an opposing one, that's like we're like getting shot with darts, poison darts, and then we have a reaction, and so we're reacting we're defending, right, our position, because our position is here and we're here and we're glued together, right? So as we investigate our own opinions, we aren't as identified with them. We say, well, they're not the truth. They're not right. They're just my opinion. It's a little bit of holding our opinions more lightly, right? When we're holding them really tightly and we're defending them, we automatically get into this defense mode, and then we're in a battle. We defend and then they defend, and it's like a debate rather than a conscious conversation, right? But it is definitely attached. It's ego attachments, it's identity. It's not it's believing our opinions are true versus just my story, not the truth.
Right.
Does that answer your question?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And in fact, so far we have been discussing mostly about how we should think, approach, and converse, in the sense that like how we should speak, right? In the book, you also talk about mindful listening. So how can we practice mindful listening?
Okay, so the reason that we first primarily pay attention to our stories and our opinions and sort of loosen our grip a little bit on them, right? The reason we do that is because without that, you can't listen to others. Because with the closed fist, I can't absorb their opinion. I can't absorb their thoughts, their reasoning, right? And so mindful listening is saying, number one, put your own stuff aside, put your judgments aside, hang them up over here somewhere, right? Recognize them as not the truth. And then mindful listening is really being aware, and then B, being willing to ask good questions, not to disprove them, because we're really good at asking questions to prove someone wrong, right? Well, when you say that, isn't it true that X is happening and not Y? And so we're always sort of like doing inquisitory questions rather than open questions. But to really want to ask a question, say, help me understand why you think that way. Help me understand how you're measuring success. What are your concerns, right? And by asking those questions, we're showing humility. When we open our hand, we're showing vulnerability, right? And humility and vulnerability are contagious. If I lighten up, then I'm giving the other person permission to open up, to open their mind, to open their heart, right? So that's why I say we have to start with our own stuff, because if I go into any conversation, I can read as many books as I want about listening, about body language, looking people in the eye, repeating their words, mirroring their body. But if we're stuck on our story, you can practice all those things you want and you won't be a better listener.
Yeah, that's interesting what you said, like, because that as you were speaking, it reminded me of the word in Sanskrit and Hindi. Vaad is the root word for discussion, to speak or to discuss. And there are two kinds of discussions, and the words are different. One is Samwaad, where both parties participate in a collaborative together fashion, and Pratiwaad, where they actually debate and take opposite viewpoints and debate. So it sounds quite similar to what you're talking about, that where you should have, there is a big room for, and often people talk about Samwaad, which is collaborative conversations, I would say, right?
Yeah, and for me, the two words and I love those words. For me, also, the word discussion has, percussive hammer in it, right? It's like I'm going to win, I'm going to do my point. The other word, and there's been really beautiful research on this, is dialogue. And dialogue is more like, okay, let's have a dialogue where we actually can reveal our thinking. We can reveal our concerns. We can reveal our standards. And I think David Bohm, who is a quantum physicist, was one of the early adopters of this idea of dialogue, where we have to have different kind of conversations. Yeah.
Awesome. So let's move on to discuss the next one, which is the creative conversations, where you say we should trust our intuition. And this was intriguing to me. And my question is, like, in storytelling conversations, you said our brain tells us stories, we get caught up with them, and we may lose objectivity. If so, then my question comes up, in creative conversation, why should we trust our intuition, and how do we know that they are not adulterated?
It's a good question. Yeah. I'd say learning the creative conversation, there's several components. One component with other people is, if we're in a good collaborative conversation, if you and I are in a learning conversation where I'm willing to listen to you and you're willing to listen to me, and we're learning, most likely we've all experienced where an idea will come out of nowhere because we got smart together instead of dumb together, right? And expecting and purposefully trying to create that is really a good thing. Let's just get smart together. So that's one way that the creative conversation just sort of shows up, because our brains aren't so stuck that they're, it's like our brains open up where so an idea can bubble up, right? So that's one piece. The other piece is the intuition piece, and that's a practice where I'm not saying, you know, if you go to work or you're in a meeting and you go, this is just awful, to just speak up and blow blow everything out of the water. But it's, you know, we do have gut instincts. We do have things that sort of attract us, you know. And I say practice because there's small ways. Like one of my favorite things is to go to my garden and without a plan and just let my intuition tell me what should be done. You know, I go out and a plant will say, there's weeding to be done on, or there's this to be done. And that's a way of just letting life unfold without it being so programmed, right? And then there are other times when we're in important conversations where facts might be telling us one thing, but our gut is telling us another, right? And then, you know, don't just well, my gut is telling me this, so I'm going to go. Do some homework. Like, okay, what is it about the facts, and what am I missing? Because many times we're missing information. But if your gut is telling you something, I'd say have a practice of beginning to listen. I mean, even small things for me, it's like I'm in the kitchen and I put something down and my head says that's dangerous. Well, maybe 5 years ago, I would have ignored that little sign or that little voice, it's dangerous. But now I go, well, okay, I'll move it, right? And we avoid a calamity, you know?
Right. That's probably similar to people saying that like the subconscious mind actually notices a few things, and then because we are not engaging with it, it is not able to bring it to the forefront. Is that similar?
That's right. We're not, it's in the background of our consciousness. And I like to think of how do we begin to pay attention to that instead of it being in the background. We can listen to those. It's like a deeper kind of listening.
Right.
It's like oh yeah, there's that voice again, you know.
Right. What did it notice? Something like that, right?
Yeah.
Great. So we deconstructed the types of conversations, but you also say that while they are distinctly different, but they are also complementary. So tell us how they are complementary and what could we do with that?
Okay. Well, the one conversation we didn't talk about is commitment conversations, right?
Right.
And just briefly, that conversation is the action conversation. It's where we decide who's doing what, who's promising what to whom, right? And we make promises every day at work, at home. You know, I'll do the dishes. I won't do this. I will do this. At work, you know, who's going to write the report? We make promises all the time, but we have a pattern of making them in a sloppy way. Mostly because we're addicted to yes. Mostly because we're addicted to sure, I can take care of that. So we make promises that are, I call them sloppy because they aren't very well mutually understood, right? So there's a whole, there's a whole dance of this commitment conversation of how we can do it better. How do we avoid being addicted to yes? How do we have no as part of the conversation? And how do we have a dialogue where we can, before we say yes, we can ask questions to better understand what we're saying yes to, right? So that's the fundamentals of that conversation. It's fairly complicated conversation to deconstruct. So the 4 conversations, storytelling, collaboration, creative, and commitment. 2 of those we love.
Right.
We love storytelling we get in a meeting, everyone's telling their story, everyone's telling their position, right? And then the next thing you know, someone, the boss or someone, the loudest voice in the room or the most aggressive or extrovert in the room says, what are we going to do? And let's decide. And what I call that the conversational bypass, because we go from storytelling to commitment, and the middle two conversations, which are the juiciest, where we learn from each other, where we co-create, where we change our minds, you know, we totally bypass them.
Right.
And usually someone will say, yeah, we don't have time for that. And my answer is, you don't have time not to do that. Because how many times have you made a commitment, made a decision that you had to revisit because you didn't consider the alternatives, because you didn't consider other possibilities, because you didn't take the time to come up with a new creative idea, right? So they're all distinct conversations.
Or even whether other people involved will be able to do and deliver, or what are their ideas to bring them into the thing, so that it can lead to their commitments, right?
That's right. So, and that's sort of like for leadership, you know, the power issue, the authority issue, when they speak and say, this is what we should do, the room shuts down because everyone gives that voice authority, right? So the leader has to be aware of the power of their voice, which many leaders aren't aware. They're stating an opinion, but everyone hears it as a fact, right? So they have to be aware and say, okay, I have a position and I have my thinking, but I need to hear from all of you so I can make a better decision, right?
Right.
And that's where they say, let's not do the bypass. Don't just listen to me. I want to hear from everybody so we can come up with the best idea. And so that's, the leader can actually do that by creating more conscious conversation inside the meeting, right?
Right. That's very interesting. In the famous Indian epic Mahabharata, which is about the battle between the cousins, the whole India was supposed to have fought that battle, aligned on two sides. So in that, the king or prince, to begin with, Yudhishthira, when he's preparing for the final battle with his cousins, so there is a story about all their brothers and the generals who are on their side sit down for a strategy discussion, and he starts the discussion by asking the youngest in the room to speak first. And some of the other kings and generals are a bit surprised. Then he clarifies that no, we need to start there, because if we speak, they won't give their opinions.
Yes.
Right. So
Absolutely.
he says that we should start in the reverse order of the age.
Yes.
So, and he speaks the last. Yeah.
That's great. Plus, it's another generation. They think differently. They don't have 40, 50 years of experience. So let's hear their ideas, you know. So that's a great example. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. That's a great example.
So how do we, what are the ways in which we can use conscious conversations to improve our lives? I mean, we've given different parts of it. We have, brought it up in different life contexts. But what can be the kind of, overview that you would give, how people can use them to improve their lives in general?
Sure. So the book has examples of both business and personal examples,
right?
Because the basic ideas about conscious conversations applies in life in general, not just work and home. So the idea is for me, I had a teacher once, his name was Rafael Echeverria, he's Chilean, and he said, if I took you to Alaska and we spent 6 months with the Inuits, they have, I don't know, it's controversial, but they have more than 20 names for snow. And he said, if we learned those names for snow, and then we came back to the US. I'm in New England. So we came back to New England where it snows. He said, with those 20 names, you will never see snow the same way again.
Absolutely.
Because now we have distinctions in our mind. We have names in our mind so that we see, oh, I don't know the names. I should learn the names for their snow, but that's this kind of snow, and that's igloo snow, and that's snow for water, and so we have a new way, and all of a sudden what we see is different. And so I think that about conversations, that if we can think about how our stories and our words, we can understand the DNA of that. It's sort of like we become less innocent. We can't just be in conversations asleep, and I call it sleep talking. We can just we go about our way and we say, this is this and this is this, and I'm right, you're wrong. And we can just go about it all day and we're miserable or we suffer. But we say, no. There's a lot more to it. Let's understand it so we can enter a conversation with our partner or our spouse or our kids or our friends with more awareness, with more awakeness, with more mindfulness, right? Versus being asleep. So that's my idea, is like through the ideas in the book, we have new ways of thinking about and hearing and interacting with conversations. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. So you're saying that, like, after reading the book and practicing these, have a new awakening. Is that?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
And walk and move in life with that awakening. Right. So that's
right. Like an example would be, without the book, say there's certain kind of people that say certain things to you and they trigger you. Like you get shot with a poison dart and then you react. Well, if you understand that is their opinion, it says more about them than it says about you. You don't have to let that poison dart in. You can catch that dart. You go, wait, well, I think this belongs to you. So it's a very different. It gives us some self consciousness, some confidence, some self-awareness, and we can navigate difficulties. It takes practice. It doesn't happen overnight. There's no magical switch. But with practice, we can actually change our reactions and our interactions.
Oh, that's interesting. You said, like, you can think that it is theirs and don't let it hurt you and give it to them, right? Or let it belong to them. There's in Buddhism, there's a story of like someone who called Buddha names for a long period of time, and his students asked him, how come you're not getting offended? So Buddha is said to have replied that he is giving what he has. And I didn't accept it. It is still his.
It's his.
So why should I be affected?
Yes, right. Don't let that in, right? And there's another piece of that I really like. This comes back to the power issue. Someone might throw a dart at you, and you have two choices. You can give it back and say, this is yours. You can also decide that, oh, I respect that person. I trust their insights. I'd like to learn more. Tell me why you think that about me.
Right.
And that's a humility. That's showing, say, tell me, maybe I should learn something. But then there are other people that you go, you know what? It's evil. It's not fair, and you don't even have to respond. I liken that you catch the dart and you throw it to the winds, or you throw it to the gods. And say,
but to catch a dart, you have to be Chuck Norris.
Yes.
Okay. So we started with the stories. So I have another question relating to stories from a comment that you're making in the book, that you say that there are benefits to hearing anew those stories that we love, and one question is, of course, what are the benefits, right? And the related part is that all ancient civilizations have had great story traditions, and those stories are retold. So in fact, many were oral traditions. Is that something that they knew about these, the benefits of these? And tell us more about your views on these things.
Yeah, I think that, there was a major shift in the human brain. I have many 70,000 years ago or so, where the brain was able to create stories,
Right.
fiction, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the birth of mythology. That was the birth of, now, instead of being limited to being able to have a 150 person community or tribe, we get expanded, because now many thousands of people could believe in the same myth, could believe in the same story. And that changed civilization. So storytelling is ancient in that way, that it allows us to share life and share cultural norms and beliefs, right? Which served us really well. It also has a downside, because how many wars do we know? Because we're fighting over my story's right, my religion's right, your story or your religion is wrong, right?
Right.
So storytelling, I like to say storytelling is a beautiful thing, and it can be really detrimental, right?
Right.
So bringing consciousness to the story, like even raising children. I have two sons who are now adults, but we pass on our beliefs and our stories to our children. So for a parent to be conscious of, are we passing on valuable stories? Are we passing on prejudicial stories? What are we doing to bring some consciousness to that, right? So yeah, stories are lovely and they serve us, and they're embedded in the whole of society. I mean, money is a story.
Yes.
We all agree that
because
this
we
piece
believe
of
in
paper
it.
is worth something. That's it, but it's a story, right? Serves us well. But then there are stories that don't serve us well.
Yeah. In fact, yesterday we were at a talk, and some of us had helped organize the talk, and they talked about how now US dollar is the currency in which a lot of countries, not only the US itself, have faith, and they hold that currency as currency of value. Before that, it was British pounds, and then they went back in story to remind us that, like, there were time it was Dutch guilder, then Spanish currency, Greek currency, and so on. So historically, right? Like, and if you see the history of South Asia, you also know that there were times when then different Indian currencies, and similarly Persian currencies and all were in great demand. So.
Yeah, the objects were currency. Tulips were currency.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And that was the story of the time,
Yeah, seashells. Yeah. Okay. In this segment, Chuck, I'm going to share some of the phrases that that jumped out as I was reading the book, and probably share some observations, and then my question will come in the end, right? So as I was reading your recommendations, you have it spread across the book, and they have consolidated some in the end. So you use phrases like adopt a non-judgmental attitude, right? So when I read that, I was reminded of like John Kabat-Zinn's writings on mindfulness. He also and others also actually recommend contemplation, introspection, self-observation, and so on and so forth, right? You also said our adopted patterns, beliefs, and desires, some of which you actually mentioned at the start of our conversation. All of these are promoted in the book. You highlight this, that these are all promoted by the ego's identity. And you recommend that we should be an observer and be a witness. So when I read these, there were some thoughts that were triggered in my mind from my background, my upbringing. So I thought I would share and then pose the question. So, I'm reminded of the ancient Indian scriptures like the Bhagavad Gita that exactly said that our ego's identity drives our actions and promotes attachments and desires, which ultimately cause a lot of misery. In fact, there is a Sanskrit word called ahankara, which can be roughly translated as ego, or even better as I am the doer mindset.
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
So you recommend also that, like, in conscious conversation, we should be an observer or be a witness. Again, the Gita talks about, recommends to be a sakshi or lead a life of an unattached witness and not be caught up in likes and dislikes, swept by the hurricane, driven by desire
Desires,
and
not
ego.
desires.
Yeah, exactly. So that was my, as I read, your book and was engaging with it while reading. So those were some of the thoughts that came up. I thought of sharing with you. But my question is, were you influenced in your life and work by, say, meditation, by Eastern philosophy, and so on?
Yes. I was raised in a family that was a small town in Pennsylvania as a Lutheran churchgoer, Lutheran church, and I loved I loved the pageantry. I loved the music, and I often felt a really spiritual connection there. But as I got a little older, there were a lot of contradictions that didn't make sense to me. And so there was a transition where I sort of slowly I became an agnostic. Like, wait a minute, they're preaching this, but there's things about it that don't make sense. And but I still had that. I guess I had tasted the spiritual nature of things, right? Because I had some pretty good out-of-body experiences. And so that sort of, I was hungry. And I was introduced to transcendental meditation when I was 18. And that was my first dive in. So many, many years ago. And then after that, I was introduced to other teachers, basically Indian teachers that I studied with. So there was a huge influence in my thinking, and the meditation and the teachings gave me that taste of spirituality, right? And then eventually, that and my interest in philosophy, that's what all came together to have me study language and conversations, and then to really put these together and go, wow, yeah, we're in conversation like fish in water, right? But yet we can be in the fish water and not even know we're in it. We're in conversations. And so to bring this awareness to it, to bring the witnessing to it, is where we can get out of a bad pattern. Right. It's that ability to self-observe, that ability to neutrally observe and go, oh wow, that pattern is really, I don't want that anymore. And then we have to do our work, right? And there's no magical switch, but we have to do our work. But if we can go, oh, there's a better way of thinking, there's a better way of reacting. It's the power of the witness that allows us to do that. So there's a huge background of philosophy, psychology, and Eastern mysticism that has influenced my work.
Yeah. In fact, behind you, I can see the picture of His Holiness, the Dalai Lama.
Yes. Yeah. I was lucky 8 or 9 years ago. My wife and a dear friend, I'd been diagnosed with leukemia 30 years ago, and my dear friend had a serious blood disease or bone marrow disease. And so we had a private audience with the Dalai Lama, and we got to see his doctor twice, which was a wonderful experience. Yeah.
That's so lovely. That's that's a nice way to bring this conversation to an end. We can go on, and there are many aspects. I think we have identifying, common areas of interest, and we could continue the discussion. Maybe, we could do that another time. We could invite you back
Sure.
for, maybe more specific discussion on some aspect of your work rather than, this one was
Sure.
we tried to cover a broad
Broad.
range with the book as
Right.
the framework for this discussion.
Right.
Thank you so much for giving us the time.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Our pleasure. Thank you for joining us in yet another episode of Move Conversations. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Please subscribe to the Move Conversations YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get notifications of new episodes. Thank you very much. Till I see you in the next episode. Thank you very much. Have a great day.